During the 1800s, we began to see an increase in immigrants coming in from Europe. In particular, in the mid 1800s, there were two large immigrant groups that made their way to port cities along the East Coast, particularly New York. You had the Irish immigrants and the German immigrants. Now, when you compare the two groups, there were some defining characteristics for both of these groups that differed in each. First of all, the Irish mostly came during the mid 1800s because of the potato famine that happened back in Ireland, right? Potatoes were a staple crop, not only for their food, but it was also a crop they used to be able to make a living. There was this huge blight, right? So like the disease that hit the potato, and all of the potato harvests all died out. And they had no food. There was a huge amount of famine throughout Ireland. And so many people suffered and died through starvation and disease that spread. So these Irish immigrants started to come over in droves and masses to the United States because they had nothing left for them in Ireland. So the majority of those Irish immigrants who came were extremely poor. Ireland itself is overwhelmingly a Catholic country, so they were poor. They were majority all Catholic Irish immigrants. And they settled in these large cities, particularly New York and all these coastal eastern cities. And they worked at mostly any types of jobs that they could find. So they were very basic, unskilled jobs. Now, the German immigrants, on the other hand, they came either to escape the political persecution that was happening back in Germany or to pursue different types of economic opportunity here, feeling that they had a better chance in the United States than back in Europe. There was a combination of Catholics, Protestants, and Jews coming in among the German immigrants. And they were more likely to settle in the Midwestern states and begin to farm there. Also, in comparison to the Irish, the German immigrants did have some money when they came over to the US. So these were our two largest immigrant groups that we found. So, because of this, we began to see a new type of political party that began to form in the United States, and they were known as nativists, right? And the nativists then were these groups of people who felt that the immigrants coming into the country posed a problem, right? And they opposed immigration. They felt that those coming in were taking jobs for much lower pay than the native born American citizens. And these nativists formed a political party known as the KnowNothing Party. And the reason why they got that name is because when people would ask them about their beliefs and what they did, a Know-Nothing Party, they would refuse to talk about it in any kind of detail because they would say that they knew nothing. So hence the name. But in particular, the major ideas of the Know Nothings were the fact that they were anti immigrants. They believed in longer periods for naturalization. If somebody wanted to become a US citizen, they had to go through this huge, long process and waiting period. And they wanted a ban on any kind of foreign immigrants from holding any kind of public office. All right, so these were the basic premises of the Know Nothing Party. Because of this large influx of people coming into the United States, cities began to grow, right? We saw this large amount of urbanization happening, in particular because of the Industrial Revolution, which also added to the growth of cities, but also because of these large numbers of immigration that was coming in from Europe, right? The transportation revolution began to connect more cities through the creation of the steam engine, which created the steamboat and the train. It allowed for cities to connect to one another and people being able to travel from city to city much easier. The Industrial Revolution then ended up creating new jobs, right? We saw the growth of factories and different types of factories and increased labor. So more people moved to the city to be able to get these jobs. And so they started to come in looking for work. Now, of course, with the growth of the cities also came certain challenges. There was a large number of overcrowding in a lot of these cities. A lot of these cities were not yet equipped to be able to handle the large numbers of people coming. Many of these places were very poor, unsafe, and dirty housing conditions, especially in the areas that these new immigrants and those that were relatively poor lived in, these slum neighborhoods, right? They had these makeshift buildings that were not very safe. They weren't very sanitary. There weren't a lot of public services being able to be offered. Because of the poor sanitation, it was easy to see diseases and epidemics spread quickly. Um, and there really was no permanent police or firefighters. A lot of these things were dependent on volunteers. And so, especially in the poor neighborhoods, if there was some kind of emergency or something happened, it was difficult to be able to get any kind of police or firefighters to come to these emergencies and be able to set up any kind of order. So these were some of the problems that occurred through the growth of these cities.